The affordability crisis is pushing more and more people in Ontario to rely on food banks. More than 1 million Ontarians visited a food bank in the last year. This is a record high. It's an increase of 25%. There were more than 7 million total visits, up 31% from the year before, and a staggering 134% from 2019 to 2020. Feed Ontario, who crunched the numbers, said food banks cannot keep up with the need, and there are growing reports of empty shelves and fears that some organizations may be forced to close their doors. Carolyn Stewart joins me now. She's the executive director of Feed Ontario. Carolyn, let's start with these numbers. They really take your breath away. Over 1 million people in Ontario using food banks. Are they shocking to you, these numbers?
I have been with this organization for 15 years and I still find them staggering. Um, it should be for everyone and terrifying for our governments, quite frankly. I think one person who is in need of a food bank is too many. So to hear that 1 million of our neighbors, of seniors, children going to school are having to access food banks in order to be able to feed their families is far too many.
So you mentioned seniors, you mentioned children. I'm wondering if the data shows exactly who is in need of the food bank.
Yeah, unfortunately, hunger doesn't discriminate. A third of food bank users are children. We see seniors, single and two-parent families. One of the fastest rising groups is actually employed individual. So now 1 in 6 people that we see and support have employment, and then we're also supporting those on social assistance programs as well. So really, it could be anyone from any walk of life, and the only criteria we have for our services is need.
And Mississauga, which is west of Toronto for our viewers across the country, is among the worst off. Why is that?
I think we've seen growth across the province. Unfortunately, in Mississauga, they're dealing with a quickly rising population, the housing shortage and housing affordability crisis that affecting everyone with the density and growth they're seeing is huge. But really, it's the affordability issue that we're seeing all across the province. People are struggling to be able to afford their most basic necessity, housing costs, with insufficient employment as well as poor social assistance rates are just really creating that perfect storm. And then that's being compacted by the last 4 years of the inflation growth.
And food banks as a whole are struggling. You're calling out the provincial government today. What are you asking of them?
Yes, reality is food banks were not created as a long-term solution to food insecurity. We're an emergency service for an emergency need. We don't solve in food insecurity, but rather good social policy does. And so we need to make sure that change is being done long-term because food banks will not be able to keep up with this increased demand. We are already seeing over 70% of our food banks indicating that they're having trouble keeping shelves full when it comes to inventory, and over 50% are indicating that they're having trouble reaching their funding goals to be able to even operate and keep their doors open. So when we're seeing that at this level of demand, we have huge concerns with further growth will mean food banks shelves will be bare, they'll have to reduce service, or worse, shut their doors. And where does that leave communities across the province?
Carolyn Stewart is the executive director for Feed Ontario. Carolyn, thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.